Welcome to Reconciling SaaS, the interview series where I talk to accountants with innovative business models and growth strategies who are showing what success looks like in the industry. I'm Guy Pearson. I'm a recovering accountant, co-founder and CEO of Ignition, and we're joined today by none other than Will Lopez, head of mission at Gusto and founder of Advisorify. Welcome, Will. Can you give us a quick overview of your accounting industry journey to date for the folks listening in?
Sure thing. Hey, Guy, thanks for having me on the show. This is exciting. For those who don't know me, Will Lopez, been around for quite a hot minute. I've been an accountant for about 20 years. Have degrees in accounting, went to school for accounting, started in public life, then went off to run my own practice back in 2012, which is where I believe I met you, Guy. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's 100% right. I think I was going back through my emails before we kicked off, and I think we had a demo of Ignition with Advisorify in 2015.
Yeah, I remember that.
And I think it was like February, so it's not. We hadn't really. We had a few customers in the US, and I was reached out to yourself. I can't remember why. I think I trawled the Zero email listings of like all the partner advisory firms, etc. And I reached out to have a chat because I saw 3 plans on your website, and I was like, "Yeah, we'll get this," or the owner of the firm will get this. And lo and behold, you did. And I mean, it was not a very successful demo, mostly because you just spent made an investment, should I say, in building your own internal stack. But nevertheless, we became mates, and I don't think we met until Denver ZeroCon, but in person.
That's absolutely right. In fact, I think after our call, I realized, wait a minute, was Guy just scoping me out because I created something kind of similar to Ignition for my own practice? That was my initial thought. But no, we definitely hit it off as best buds, and I think it's been a great friendship ever since. Even coming to Gusto, it's been a great friendship and partnership between Ignition and Gusto. So that's been really exciting.
100%. Taking it back a step, you started off, and I was looking at your LinkedIn, so hopefully that's a half decent source of truth. You were on the commerce side, and then you moved into public practice. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's a controller in your title.
Absolutely a fair assumption. In fact, that's how I got turned on to accounting. In fact, I started at became a project manager for a parking company down in Palm Beach County. So I'm from South Florida, born and raised. And the parking company was a startup. We started up out of the owner's home. Her name was Kristen. And my job was to basically manage and hire roughly about 100 employees. And I was young at this time, something like, I don't know, 21, 22, and became really successful at it. But there's somebody in the back office. His name was Michael Maturano. If you're listening, I know you're probably listening. It was because of you. But anyways, he kind of got me fired up about accounting. He was an accountant by trade, and was showing me all like the tips and tricks of the trade. And I just fell in love with it, from cash accounting to, at the time, what I didn't know was cash accounting and segregation of duties and all these kind of technical accounting terms. But it was because of that I ended up becoming a controller for a non-for-profit. So after that parking job, becoming a project manager there, I ended up deciding to go with accounting, became a controller for a large not-for-profit, and stayed in private for quite a bit before turning into public.
That's amazing. Shout out to Michael.
Yeah, shout out to Michael.
We have you to thank for Will in the industry. Awesome. And so you then went on to kick off your own firm after being an auditor as well, which we'll leave those dark days of question asking behind. But tell us that little story.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, I was a financial statement auditor for about 5 years, was about to make manager, and notorious, right? Like public practice, traditional, got totally burned out. Mm-hmm. And said, you know what, this is not for me. Accounting's for me, but this is not for me. And but I will say I do love auditing. So I'm probably one of the few out there that still to this day love auditing. I just don't love to sell it. And I don't love some of the stigma that it comes with, but it made me sharp as hell, Guy. Like my technical accounting.
Question asking. You're great at that.
Yeah, I mean, it made me sharp as hell. And, it was a good thing. So I felt really comfortable like leaving a really nice paying job for a not so nice paying job at the start, which was my own firm, Advisor So started that literally in my house. And what's kind of interesting, guys, I knew I was not going to be successful as an accounting firm or as quickly successful as an accounting firm competing in my local market because Palm Beach County, the Tri-County area, Palm Beach County, Miami-Dade, Broward, it's just chocked full of accounting firms, and they serve a very specific niche down there, which is, the retirement community, hospitality, restaurants, things of that sort, right? Food and beverage, high net worth. It's not necessarily an industry I wanted to get myself into. I those industries kind of didn't pique my interest in, and I think trying to gain a book of business within that concentrated area was just going to be a long process. So I ended up driving myself online after I found out that a couple companies had partner directories that I could promote my services on, and lo and behold, became super successful pretty early by expanding our reach online. And I don't know if you remember, but the early days, we didn't call it like, cloud-based accounting. It was just, I was an internet-based firm. That was the term. And so there weren't things such as like tech stacks and vertical tech stacks and all this kind of stuff. And it was just like, yeah, we run an internet-based firm, and we sell accounting services across the US. And yeah, that's what we do. So the early days of the
And
cloud were really wild.
I remember, like when we first met, there might have been 5 pages on one of those directories total, and
Yeah,
so it was
pretty
pretty
much.
easy to sort of go through the list. And your website definitely stood out. Now, the vertical and the industry you went after, if I remember correctly, and once again, racking my brain, is software startups and scaling businesses. Is that the simplified way to put it?
Yeah, pretty much. And I would probably throw professional service as well. I think professional services, especially in the early days, was at least for me and our firm, was very successful online. It was an easy tech stack. I think at the time, the tech stack that was available for a lot of companies were around the professional services. So we ended up getting some really good traction there. And I think even towards the tail end of my practice life, something like 65% of our client base was professional services, real estate right behind it. But software was definitely a big percentage by the end. It was a larger percentage at the start, but it ended up dwindling down, and we kind of focused in on that professional service niche.
Now, with the move to Miami for a whole bunch of startups over COVID, do you think that would have changed?
Probably, but I wasn't even serving that local market, so they could have had a heyday with somebody else. So who probably was doing accounting with a rock, hammer, and chisel down in South Florida. So
Oh, ouch, ouch. Oh, so how did the entrepreneurial gene start? I
oh,
think we've talked about in the past that like you have family full of entrepreneurs, so I'm curious to dig into that a little bit.
yeah, absolutely. So for those who don't know, I was born in a family of entrepreneurs. You know what's interesting? The Latin culture is very entrepreneurial. It's the fastest entrepreneurial market in all of the U.S. Latin America, Hispanic America. We love business. We love to start business. So both my parents were entrepreneurs, and both out of a love of entrepreneurship and business ownership. It brought them freedom. It brought them, and it empowered them. It enabled them. They loved the journey and the exercise therein. And both out of a necessity. My parents were born poor. They never graduated past the fifth grade. I was born in poverty. I don't know if you know that, Guy, but I have an early memory of me being 8 years old, my mom boiling, water on a stove and mixing it with warm water. And I would take a cup and I'd pour it over my head, and that's over a drain. And that's how I basically would take my daily showers and stuff like that. But we lived in the back of my dad's business in the early days, and business for them and entrepreneurship for them was not, it's entrepreneurship is not always successful. And I think sometimes people paint successfulness against entrepreneurship, but my parents had very high highs and very low lows. Um, but one thing was consistent was that business ownership, entrepreneurship put food on the table, put clothes on her back, It put a roof over our head. And for that, I'm very grateful. And so I like to joke around and say I was the kid in the never ending story. I don't know if you've seen that movie, but the kid that gets
Yeah.
very enthralled, right, in the book, in these adventures, except I was enthralled very much so with my parents' stories of entrepreneurship. My dad had me late in life, in his mid 50s, believe it or not. And so by then, I mean, he had lived 4 lifetimes as far as I'm concerned. I mean, he had gone through many businesses, many ups, many downs. And so my parents recounted all their stories of business ownership and failures and successes that, I was just enthralled with all of it. And I thought to myself that business ownership was the ultimate adventure. I just never realized that accounting would actually turn on that fire. And that's exactly what happened. Was I knew one day I was going to be an entrepreneur. I knew one day I was going to be a business owner. I know it was going to be very creative within it. I had no idea that accounting would actually turn it on, thanks to Michael Maturano. But accounting really turned it on for me. And so that kind of led me down the path that I ended up going, running a very successful firm, doing what I'm doing here at Gusto, trying to be creative for our industry and entrepreneurial for our own industry's sake. But yeah, that's the story of the rise.
I really appreciate you sharing, mate. Do you mind if I ask what business lines they were in?
Oh, yeah,
And I
that's a great
appreciate you being
question.
vulnerable. Sorry.
Oh, no, absolutely fine. So I think the most successful lines that they were in were back in the 70s and early 80s. My dad got into the type repair business. And so he was actually what we would describe as our modern day AAA. And so he serviced all the major our modern day, I'm sorry, Office Depot. And so he serviced and provided both furniture, supplies, equipment to AAA, the company, Pan Air at the time, American Airlines. And so he had a business down in Miami that was thriving and very successful, and was kind of on the cusp of becoming kind of like that supplier of goods and services to corporations. And so some family drama pretty much brought it to its knees, but that was a very successful line. My dad was also, at least when I was born and, what we ran, he owned a very successful secondhand store. And so that's kind of was his forte for a long time. Some of the earliest memories, I'll share one that was really cool to me. When my father moved from Puerto Rico to New York, which is what normally Puerto Ricans do. He moved there, and this was during the 40s. He worked at an umbrella making factory. And I would say this is the early days of subscription services. So check this out. He worked at an umbrella making factory, and he went up to his supervisor and basically said, "Hey, how about you don't pay me money?" And I think he was making something like $10 a month, based on the currency of the time and, the way money
Yeah,
worked.
yeah.
He said, "Don't pay me money every month. How about you pay me in umbrellas?" That's what he said. "How about you pay me in umbrellas?" And obviously the supervisor just like, ha, ha, that's excellent. I'll be glad not to pay you money, but umbrellas. And so what my dad did was he took umbrellas, he got paid umbrellas, and he knocked on people's door and sold umbrellas for $10, $1 down, $1 a month. And by month 3, he was making something like $250 a month just in subscriptions for purchasing the umbrella. And so that's how, entrepreneurial my family was even in situations like that. My parents were always good at finding a dime somewhere. They were always great at making a dollar, and they would hustle so hard to make it happen.
That's amazing. I really appreciate you sharing. This is brand new for me, so I'm learning something new about yourself, and there's certainly things that are definitely clicking and making more sense when I think about your drive, particularly, which I've always admired from afar. So, um, okay, and so all of this builds up project manager and hustling and hiring parking attendants and then learning about finance, becoming an accountant, auditor, asking questions about numbers, finances, business models, starting your own firm, building a niche, being successful. All of this makes a whole lot more sense to me, and I'm really appreciating the color. Um, Now, we flip over into you wanting to sell your firm and dive over into software. I know you're on different councils for different software companies, all those sorts of things. Do you want to talk through the motivation behind that and what was I guess the catalyst for the exit from the day to day of the book of business that is the accounting firm?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously when I was in practice, at least I felt like I was on the front lines of what I felt was a major technological revolution between inside accounting, right, and which was spilling over into the small business space. Um, you know, Massive changing of the guards between the old ways of doing accounting to the new ways of handling accounting. And so, I felt like I had a fairly good grasp on what was going on. I'd built my own software, that. I had hired my own engineers at the time, which was very unheard of, I think, way back when kind of the internet and cloud accounting was kind of kicking off. I wanted to kick things around. I wanted to try a lot of different things. And so just being more vocal about all of that, especially online. I had a YouTube channel that I was generating business from and trying to share my thoughts on, just kind of allowed me to kind of it allowed other companies and other fintech companies and tech companies to kind of reach out and say, hey, it looks like you kind of know what you're talking about. You kind of know what you're doing. You love what you're doing. Why don't you come join our councils? And so I had the privilege of joining, a variety of councils, becoming advisor to some startups that some of them were successful, some of them failed. Um, Joining councils like XPAC and Zero's Partner Advisory Council and a few others. It allowed me to kind of weave in a lot of the storytelling of what I've seen throughout the years too, because I saw the turn of the century as far as like, internet really changing accounting, because those were the early days of like 2001 through 2004. I was also a part of the Great Recession here in America, where 2008 through 2010, in my opinion, kind of caused the cloud to happen because people were half of the workforce within the accounting profession at that time lost half their team, and we're able to maintain revenues, and so people were flocking home, not because of a pandemic, but actually to curb costs. And so flocking home, managing clients from home ended up kind of spurring on this online crave and online desire. So taking all that history of my own personal background, my own family's background, my own experience within the profession really allowed me to kind of pour into other companies like Gusto, like Zero, like Receipt Bank, Avalara, Veeam, just kind of name your pick, and allowed me the privilege to just share my own thoughts and my own expertise about where accounting has been, where it's going, where there's market opportunity, both globally and here domestically, and really kind of empower some of these companies to think a little different than what we're normally thinking about when we think about accountants.
And so, based on what you're saying, that seemed like a more important thing than running an accounting firm, hence the sale. Or am I deducing too much?
No, I think it was right time, right place. I was very happy doing what I was doing, Guy. In fact, I remember when I was in early conversation with Gusto. It's not the greatest sales pitch to become an employee of a company, but I basically told Lexi Reese, who was our former COO at the time, you're going to have to convince me to want to go to Gusto, because I'm like, you're my job and what I do day in and day out. I'm very, very happy with. I'm not lured by tech companies. I'm not fancied by the other side whatsoever. And so, you're going to have to really convince me as to why I want to come over. And lo and behold, they did some pretty good convincing. And I did some pretty big soul searching as well, as far as like, the love I have for my industry and the love I have for my profession. And I felt like I could continue doing what I love, continue still being an entrepreneur that I am, except have greater impact, more resources to do it, while keeping the integrity true, I think, at the core. So I sold my
Sure.
firm and kind of cracked it in half, actually, and sold it to two young cloud accountants that started our practice no longer than 2 years before I sold it to them, and came over to Gusto to kind of continue the journey.
Appreciate you sharing. And so I remember when you joined Gusto, I think we had a chat not long after, and you were getting behind the notion of, I think it was dubbed people advisory. I think that's sort of like the framework you gave it. But obviously, most businesses have a very high percentage of their cost base and running being humans. So it makes a whole lot of point that accountants who are trying to guide a business owner on how they build their business, they understand more and more about the cost side, the human side, and sort of how that all runs. Is that, I mean, that's my outside intake. I don't think we ever summed it up quite like that, but is that a fair statement? And 5 years on, how do you feel? Is it 5 years? 5 years on, how do you feel that that's gone?
Yeah, it is a fair statement. The recommendation I provided Gusto's leadership was to build and create a legacy for accountants. That is, I feel like it's every fintech, any serious fintech's responsibility to not only deliver great products and services, but also to be able to empower this industry or their customer base in a way that's long lasting. And so the dawn of people advisory actually came out of my firm. I had an experience back in 2015 with a customer that I had sold everything underneath the sun, and when it came to advisory, except he was having a massive people problem. He had spent something like $700,000 on recruiter fees and couldn't retain one single employee as a result of it. And I remember him asking, him asking me, Will, yeah, that's a lot of money. In the Bay Area too, so you can just imagine. I remember him sitting across from him. We were drinking some beers, and he just looked at me and he said, "Will, you're my accountant. You know exactly what's going on in my books. You know I spent a lot of money. What in the world can I do differently here?" And as a typical, like, it was the only moment in my life that I acted like a typical accountant. I said, maybe we should find a cheaper recruiter. And that was my solution. And so it was only
something needs to change. Okay.
Yeah. Something needs to change. Maybe find a cheaper recruiter. That's how you're going to lower your expenses. And so that's when I realized that me as an accountant and as an advisor was definitely a journey, not a destination. And that was the dawn of people advisory, where I said to myself, as accountants, we actually don't necessarily need to be benefit brokers. We don't need to be HR advisors. We just need to be sharper and savvier about people operations. And it's so critical to our own success, because had I been able to serve him and his company in a way that both cared about his numbers and the faces behind the financials, he would have been all the more successful. He would have increased his margins drastically. His team would have been happier. He would have retained some pretty incredible talent instead of churn them. Massive business impact. And so coming to Gusto is a people platform. We love and care about the workforce. We believe the economy flows through the paycheck. And that's why, when we were creating people advisory starts with payroll. The payroll is the center of a lot of things. It's also a reflection of the value both the employee offers the employer and vice versa, right? It's a representation of a relationship. And so I absolutely believe that accountants need to think higher about this thing. We need to get out of our own way here and stop looking at this offering as a nuisance, as a necessary evil, as a way to cause stickier clients, right? And we sell it as a thing that is bundled with other things, and we lose our pants on payroll because it's filled with scope creep, but yet we offset it by charging more for bookkeeping, more for advisory, right? And so we continue to perpetuate this problem around payroll, where we're just leaking all sorts of value, not giving it the respect that it's due. Yet COVID really accentuated it. So quite honestly, Guy, I would say to myself, like, I believe I got lucky I was at the right place at the right time and executed correctly. And our team was able to execute correctly because pre-COVID, we were working on this already. We were paving our way towards people advisory. And I remember talking to Jacqueline and my team and the rest of us. And I remember saying to myself, this is going to be a huge ball to push uphill because it's different thinking. It's still CAS, but it's being applied to payroll, and everybody knows CAS to finances and financials, but not CAS to payroll. And so, and it was only when COVID hit that all of the industry got tossed headlong into people ops. And that's when we pivoted greatly during that moment, changed up our narrative around what this thing was. And actually COVID brought a lot of clarity to people advisory. And so through COVID, through people advisory, we've become super successful 5 years later.
Oh, fantastic, mate. I think you had a recent talk or a clip that you put up where you said you had 50,000 accounting professionals. I don't know if that means 50,000 firms or 50,000 CPAs or bookkeepers, or like what unit of measurement you're using there necessarily. Either way, it's a lot. How do you manage to keep all those folks engaged? Like one-to-one, I know you're a really engaging character. It's a really hard to build and keep a community of that size. At scale.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm definitely going to take no credit here. I think Gusto has done an incredible job of building its own culture and scaling a high performance organization with trust as the foundation. And I think a lot of us here, both on whether we're serving employers and their employees or accountants and their firm members, what we try really hard to do is externally rotate the passion and the care and the values that we have internally out into the market. And so one of the biggest things that I wanted to do, especially in the accountant segment here at Gusto, was to take all the goodness of Gusto on the inside, because I experienced a lot of it pre-Gusto. And after Gusto, I'm like, man, we do a lot of great things here at Gusto internally. And so like it's beautiful, it's passionate, it's incredible, and it causes a lot of, zeal begets zeal. And so all I wanted to do was rotate it outwards and say, can we emulate the same thing that we're doing here inside Gusto outwards? And so through people advisory, through our sales teams, through our customer service teams, through our engineering teams, we build and we create services with all our values riddled throughout. You cannot be successful here at Gusto if you're a great performer, but not living up to the characteristics that we want you to live up to here at Gusto. You would, I mean, in my opinion, I'd let you go. If you lived up to all our characteristics and still couldn't hit numbers, you would still, it's a competitive marketplace, right? I think I'd still let you go. It's got to be this beautiful passion and balance between action and compassion, right? And so, I think Gusto's done an incredible job at scaling up business by taking action, solving critical customer pain points, while also paving the way for new, fresh thinking. And I think that's allowed us to go from the early days of thousands of customers to now tens of thousands of accounting firms nationwide partnering with us. Has it all been sunshine and rainbows? Absolutely not. Right. And so, I'm very cognizant of that. We're all very cognizant of that over here at Gusto. But do we work day in and day out to do the right thing? Absolutely.
I appreciate you sharing. Now we'll talk more about the community, sort of following on. Obviously, I'm aware that you're a man about town in terms of going to almost every single conference there is in the industry. I know that there's probably a difference between how you think about a conference as an attendee versus a community builder / vendor representative. So if you were to give a game plan for accountants, bookkeepers, tax professionals, how to get the most out of their money, given we're all financially minded people. Like, what do you think the best game plan is for a conference? Like, what should they do to prep, and what should they look to be getting out of it?
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting is, obviously conferences, in my opinion, or at least I've come to the place now where conferences are very small microcosm of kind of what's going on the front lines. Clearly, there are way more accountants in the world than there are people going to conferences, right? And I think in America there's something like 1 million accountants, and I just came back from QuickBooks Connect, right? There's 3,000 people that go there, so that's, I mean, it's when you divide one into the other, it's absolutely immaterial. But I think conferences are incredible places to gain knowledge of kind of what is currently here, what you can implement today, and also receive inspiration. How are firms thinking about their own success? What are they doing differently? What are the providers doing differently? I also believe that when you go to a conference, you should be on the lookout to hear from software providers on how they're trying to empower you in your own success in your own career. Because I definitely have a little bit of an opinion around partner programs that are just here to serve only your needs, versus partner programs that are here to pave a way for your future. And that's in my opinion, that's how I think we've tried to run our own partner program here at Gusto, right? That's why People Advisory exists. People Advisory is bigger than Gusto, clearly. It's powered by us. We've made a lot of investments into it. But if you want to offer payroll, you can do it. If you want to reimagine payroll, you can do that too. And so, if you're going to a conference, really kind of keep an eye out for that kind of thing. Like, what are they here for my future, right? Are they thinking differently about who I am and my own team's future? If they are, I think that's a great partner to consider. If they're just providing the status quo, I think I would say there's nothing wrong with that, but keep on the lookout for something better.
Perfect. This isn't in the questions I've got here, but I'm wondering if you had a mentor throughout your journey. So I found that sometimes attending those conferences was a great way to hear from those who've been there before you and balance it up against your own ideas, as well. And I found the conference piece probably useful because it's a talk or presentation that's usually been thought about ahead of time, so it's considered. Whereas if you ask someone off the cuff, uh, randomly when like we're having a chat, they don't have time to sort of process and think about what they would say. Like, it's not sort of a process thought, so to speak. They haven't sort of thought all the way through. Um, do you think that, like, I would imagine there's quite a few folks who list you as a mentor or someone they aspire to hang out with and learn from in the industry? Do you think that plays a big part at these conferences as well?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Whether you're being mentored directly or indirectly, I think everything that I've ever believed or come to believe or learned or come to learn has been through the community. Um, you know, Very, very few software providers have actually inspired me to consider new ways of thinking. I mean, I like, individuals like yourself have inspired me. Rod Drury of Zero has really inspired me. Like, these very forward thinking individuals who are very passionate about our profession have inspired me. But by and large, um, networking with my peers, um, you know, was the largest impact on my career. I don't think I'd be here if it weren't for, in the early days, like the Ryan Lazanis, the Blake Olivers, the Bruce Phillips, the early folks that I got together with to hear how they were thinking differently. And then as the industry grew and the community grew, I ended up incorporating way more different voices into my circle. And I look up to a lot of folks that probably don't think I look up to, right? And so, I'm thinking of people like Marie Green, who left her practice and started her own firm. I look up to people. I mean, even my own colleague Jacqueline. She says I'm her mentor. I think it's quite the other way around, Jacqueline. I look up to her, and so there's so many people in the community that I look up to and that I listen to, that even to this day, um, causes me to have epiphanies, causes me to have different ways of thinking. In fact, I had a pretty big epiphany last week at QuickBooks Connect that I'll be sharing online. But, and all of that was through the community, right? It wasn't anything stage worthy or keynote worthy. It was just observing my fellow peers and being among them.
Perfect. I appreciate that, mate. Um, so obviously you're not running a firm, but you're still fairly hands-on in what's going on in accounting. So aside from Gusto, and let's leave Ignition out of this as well, what is your favorite piece of tech that you're seeing? Like if you were to start or run a firm today, what would you be rolling out?
Yeah, I personally, I'm still absolutely madly in love with the platform called Teamworks. It is a online digital platform that allows you to do multiple things, host internal chats, manage your workflow, invite your own clients into the space. I think Teamworks is incredibly impressive as a solution. I built my entire practice on it, and I think even to this day, I'd go back and probably build my practice on it again when it comes to managing my practice. And so I just think it's so forward thinking, which makes sense because a lot of it was not built for accountants. It was actually built for the engineering industry.
Mm,
And I think there's a lot of collaboration that happens within engineering, right? And so they just incorporated a lot of that mentality into the solution from being a CRM to a ticketing system to a chat system to a workflow management system. It's highly integrated, very progressive, really cool thinking around it. And then secondly, I would say, because accountants suck at marketing, and I like to market a little bit. I love the mobile app CapCut, which is a content creation application. And so for those who follow me, I create a lot of videos, I do a lot of content, and I've actually fallen in love with that. I can edit using Final Cut Pro, I can edit using some professional software, but when I'm on site trying to create some good content, that little piece of mobile app, like that app is amazing. And so I could just do a lot, and it's very powerful in content creation. So if you're looking for a way to market yourself, look at CapCut.
okay, thanks for sharing. We'll close out with a one last formal question, and I'll frame it up. Then I'm going to have some fill in the blanks for you, which is supposed to be a bit of fun. And at the end, we're going to talk about what's going on in 2024. So it's sort of like hot wings. If you've seen the show, the whole idea is for you to be able to give a shout out. So you can talk about Will Lopez, Gusto, etc., etc. Cool. So for Gusto, what's coming in 2024? I mean, I guess I have an inkling given all the rage at the moment, but what's happening on that front that you can share?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's very simple. We're going to continue to focus on some of the core issues that our customers are facing around payroll. We'll solve them. We'll solve them very creatively, and then we want to accelerate AI and artificial intelligence. Obviously, AI has just really disrupted the industry. Eddie Kim, our CTR, Chief Technology Officer, is all hands on artificial intelligence within the product. We announced a whole host of features at Gusto Next, and it was just like a glimpse into, I think, the creative thinking that we have around artificial intelligence. But with any software company, you always want them to be fixing the things that you want them to fix and plowing a way forward for things that are very drastic and new. So, for example, we'll be leveraging AI in some of the most practical ways that I think can really accelerate a lot of coolness around payroll. So, for example, with inside Gusto, you'll be able to create a job description by just filling out a couple boxes, and through AI and through our platform, because we have so much access to that data and job description data, we'll create a job description for you. Even more so, based on the location of the employee, it'll add all the language that's compliant to that state's law about employment within that
That's
company,
cool.
within that state. Yeah, super cool. May I say it? Super cool shit. All right, and so like, it's so basic, but yet so amazing, because through things like job descriptions, you could literally spin your wheels for 8 hours writing a job description. I know, I've done it. And so that's how we'll be thinking about the future. How do we think about things like that? How do we think about managing your team's timesheets within the product. Can we just throw a bunch of, just data that's just so dispersed within a spreadsheet and let AI sort it out, and you'll be able to process payroll within 5 minutes, right? And so we'll be leaning into more of those things within the product, which to me I think is really exciting, especially on the accountant front. We'll have, in my opinion, I think we'll have way more AI features for accountants than we'll probably have for employers, because I think accountants are just powerhouses of experiences of what they do within the solution. So, but those are
Very
just two
cool.
simple examples of things that we're thinking about.
Appreciate you sharing and look forward to seeing them next year as a Gusto customer with Ignition out of the US. So sure it'd be really interesting to watch that come to life. As I mentioned before, we're gonna have a bunch of fun questions. So they're fill in the blanks.
Okay.
Now I have the unfair advantage of knowing you quite well. So there's a couple in there that are kind of a little bit more perhaps not just cookie cutter. So yeah, we'll see how this goes. So fill in the blanks. My favorite thing to do on vacation is
Workout.
okay. On the weekend, you'll find me.
Riding my motorcycle nowadays.
Perfect. We talked about that at QBC. So love the picture of the bike. I'm glad to see you getting out in the mountains. Would you rather attend a concert or a sporting event?
Concert.
Do you have a favorite concert you've ever been to?
Oof. I would say my favorite concert so far, and it kind of turned me on to country, quite honestly, was Brad Paisley. So I never used to be a country fan, but when I saw a Brad Paisley concert, I was like, okay, I can do country. So I would say Brad
Ah,
Paisley turned me on to something drastically new.
that was just something I wasn't expecting given I think us both busting a move at ZeroCon in Denver years and years and years ago. It was not
Oh,
country music.
don't get me wrong. I love like house and deep house and EDM. So, but I would say if someone made an impact in my life, it was Brad Paisley on country.
Appreciate it. Sequins are
Amazing to wear and absolutely what you should wear in Vegas.
perfect. Favorite sparring partner?
Ooh, like professionally?
Yeah, I think so.
Hmm. I would say I have a wonderful friendship with a good friend Jessica McCracken of Intuit. So that's my current favorite sparring partner.
Perfect. Shout out to Jess. I met her for the first
Shout
time
out
in
to Jessica.
QVC.
She's amazing. You're an amazing pro, Jessica.
Um, and so with those fun questions out of the way, and thanks for being so open and honest throughout this whole interview series, the floor is yours, Mr. Will Lopez. I don't have cameras here, and here, like on Hot Wings, but let us know what's going on for 2024 for yourself and Gusto and where people can find you.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate that. So you can find me on Twitter at ZWilster. You find me also on Instagram at ZWilster. You can befriend me at LinkedIn. I think it's /W Lopez JR, or W Lopez Jr. For 2024, I've decided that I want to spend a lot more time with my peers. So you'll see me more out in the wilderness along your side, much more than I think in the early years of Gusto, where I was more heads down. You'll also see me doing a lot more representation work on behalf of the industry to major publications. So what does it look like that accountants are really on the front end of a beautiful change within the industry? So I'll be doing more kind of ambassadorship type work on behalf of the industry.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Phil. It's been an absolute pleasure. Great to see you and look forward to seeing you during 2024. It sounds like you'll be everywhere, so I'll bump into you somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Guy, thank you so much for having me on the show.
No worries, mate.